Hey everyone, this is the Sick Man, and welcome to another episode of the Comic Corner. Today we're going to be reviewing the Thunderbolts movie. The reason why I waited so long to watch the movie is that I wanted to see the reviews first and maybe decide if it was worth my time. Do keep in mind that this video is riddled with spoilers, so if you haven't watched the movie and don't want anything spoiled, I'd probably wait to watch this video. So, to lighten the mood a bit, my dear old father is not a huge Marvel fan like I am, but he was my introduction into superhero movies. He was the one who sat me down and watched Iron Man with me when it came out on TV around 2009, 2010. But, funny story, the moment Valentina Allegra Dufontaine showed up in Thunderbolts, he literally thought that they cast Tulsi Gabbard. I'm not kidding, this actually happened. Just a funny little tidbit to kick things off for anyone watching this video. And I also do want to clarify that as a kid, I was aware of certain characters growing up, but never really got into the MCU until my dad showed me some of the movies on TV. That's how I got introduced into the MCU, just through casual exposure rather than just being a hardcore fan from the start. Now let's address my first point about Taskmaster. I have a bit of a bias with this character because I've done my research and I am a big fan of his portrayal in characters like Marvel's Ultimate Spider-Man. While that show isn't the best compared to classics like Spectacular Spider-Man, I think it did a better job with Taskmaster than most other portrayals. So I'm actually glad that they shot her off early in the movie. Ghost taking her down early felt satisfying, and it saved us from having to deal with that feminist knockoff version of Taskmaster any longer. Now, I really liked how they portrayed the Void/Sentry here. Though I'm not the biggest Sentry fan, most of my knowledge comes from the Brian Michael Bendis New Avengers run. They kept some core elements from that version, which was nice. That said, I wish Sentry remembered his powers sooner, or if the movie made a bigger point that he existed once but was forgotten. Kind of like Hank Pym and Ant-Man. We had Captain Marvel being kept under the radar for years in the MCU, so maybe they could have done that with Sentry to make his return feel more impactful. Also, I'm not a huge fan of the meth addiction storyline. I prefer the Golden Age, more upbeat version of Sentry. The sunny personality with the mental health struggles balanced by a hopeful tone. I get addressing mental health, but keeping some of the lighter heroic traits would have been great. Moving on to John Walker. I like that he stayed true to his jerk comic book persona, but one thing that bugged me throughout the movie, why didn't he unfold the shield? I get it, unfolding or unbending the shield isn't really canon in the comics, but we've seen feats from Walker, Red Guardian, and Bucky that show that they all have some variation of the super soldier serum. I mean, Walker literally held up a huge piece of debris by himself during the fight, and Red Guardian cracked a chunk of falling debris when saving that little girl. Given that strength, it would have been so natural and kinda cool for Walker to unfold his shield, instead of, unleashing the taco shell shield. Also, not to get political, but the movie referencing Walker killing an quote-unquote innocent man when he was a terrorist felt off. I really don't know much about Ghost. I've only seen glimpses of the original character from Ed Brubaker's Captain America run. I think Ghost appeared in Brian Michael Bendis' run too, but I'm not sure. I like how they didn't just discard her after Ant-Man. I think she might have been a part of Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts in the comics, so it's cool that she's sticking around. Now, I'm a fan of characters who are generally jerks, so I'm not the biggest fan of softening characters like Yelena, America Chavez, or Kate Bishop in movies. But after Black Widow and Hawkeye, I did appreciate how Thunderbolts gave Yelena time to grieve and let her real emotions loose. She finally got to express herself, and letting her cracks show through, which made her feel more human. In the comics, Steve Rogers dies at one point, which leads to Bucky taking up the shield, becoming Captain America. This transition was a big moment in the comics, especially after the Civil War storyline. However, in the MCU, Steve passes the shield to Sam Wilson at the end of Endgame. Given that, it's understandable why Bucky wasn't Cap earlier in the MCU timeline. That said, if the Thunderbolts movie is introducing the team as the quote-unquote New Avengers, it might have made more sense to lean into Bucky's new leadership role sooner, kind of like in the comics where he leads the team post-Civil War. It would have made the team dynamic feel more natural and honored Bucky's history in the source material. Also, Steve's quote, "We don't negotiate with terrorists," feels very relevant when discussing Walker's actions and the way Falcon seems to defend them. The movie could benefit from addressing that tension more directly. Now, I know a lot of people hate Season 3 of What If, but I'm glad the chemistry between Bucky and Red Guardian from that show made its way into the MCU canon. I wish we saw Red Guardian with his shield again. I'm not a fan of removing his shield entirely, and I'd love to see the 3 Captain America rejects Bucky, Red Guardian, and Walker, have a scene where they talk about how much they hate Falcon when Falcon attempts to quote-unquote copyright strike the New Avengers in the post-credits scene. And it was a funny comment, but it also showed how complicated these dynamics are. Now, the movie reveals that the new team is the New Avengers under the Thunderbolts name. If that was the goal, I feel like they should have introduced and assembled the characters more like Bendis' New Avengers run. Now, I have a bias here because I've only read that run once, but it made a lasting impression. The team came together organically, often because of a mission gone wrong, not just because Valentina wanted to cover her tracks. That felt petty and small compared to what you'd expect from an Avengers-level team. Speaking of team assembly, Bucky Barnes has led both the New Avengers as Captain America and the Thunderbolts in comic book runs. So making him the reason the team comes together instead of Valentina would have made a lot more sense. Bucky has the experience, leadership, and history to naturally pull this group together. If they were going with the New Avengers reveal, why not stay closer to Bendis' roster? Bring in Luke Cage, who has a strong New Avengers and Thunderbolts connection. Maybe War Machine to fill in the Iron Man role since Tony's gone. If they wanted to lean into the Thunderbolts legacy, then why not bring in classic characters like Elektra and Punisher, both already introduced in the MCU? Red Guardian could take in the comic book relief role like Deadpool's tone in the comics, US Agent could have replaced Agent Venom, and Ghost stays part of Norman Osborn's team. If any case, committing fully to one concept, either New Avengers or Thunderbolts, rather than mixing the two would have given the movie a much stronger identity and bigger stakes. The movie mentions that the team is called the Thunderbolts because of Yelena's history, specifically her losing childhood soccer team. That's a bit of an unusual choice, given that we already have Thunderbolt Ross in the MCU. If they were going with the Thunderbolts name, I think they could have done more with Thunderbolt Ross's character, pulling strings behind the scenes, or given Red Hulk a bigger role to shine, rather than just saying it's Yelena's soccer team. Give it something more heroic. I do want to mention that the movie felt a little slow-paced at the beginning. That said, in the words of Midnight's Edge, it was the best of the worst. It might not be the biggest film since Deadpool and Wolverine, but it holds itself up. I also think that some other channels like WDW Pro might have exaggerated when they said that only 1/3 of the movie was great. Honestly, the movie needed some work, but the early part wasn't something that made me suffer, just a bit slow. Some scenes could have used more action or development instead of rushing through them. Overall, I'd give Thunderbolts a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's not the best MCU film in the multiverse saga, but it stands above most of the others in the saga's recent losing streak of quality. It's got its flaws and pacing issues, but it has some strong moments and characters that keep it interesting. Worth a watch if you're a fan of the MCU and want to see where this new team goes next.